8 months after I buried my husband, I watched him on a security camera alive and well, using a key to walk into the home we once shared. The intention behind the camera had been simple: a blinking red eye to guard the sprawling Connecticut colonial against intruders, while I visited my sister in Tampa. At 62 alone since Jack's funeral, every creaking floorboard had become a source of anxiety. The security company promised I could check in any time from my phone, a feature I'd nearly forgotten until a motion alert pinged on my phone on the 6th day of my vacation. My first thought was a stray animal, or perhaps a branch hitting the house. But when the app loaded, it wasn't a raccoon I saw. It was David, my son, and his wife Lisa, letting themselves in with the emergency key. Relief was my initial fleeting emotion. David had promised to check on things. But they didn't head for the kitchen to water the plants, or toward the foyer to collect the mail. They moved with a hushed, furtive purpose toward Jack's office, a room I'd kept shut since his heart attack, a shrine I couldn't yet bring myself to disturb. Already checked upstairs, Lisa's tense voice crackled through the phone's speaker. It has to be in his office. Mom never goes in there anymore, David replied, his own voice strained. Not since the funeral. They vanished down the hall. I increased the volume, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. Why were they searching my late husband's office? 15 minutes later, they reappeared. David's face was ashen. His fingers clenched around a leather portfolio I instantly recognized as Jack's. Lisa glanced nervously toward the front windows. She can never know about this, David said, his voice clearer now, as they paused beneath the camera. If these accounts are traced back to Mom's name, she'll go to prison. Dad set her up perfectly. How could he do this to her? Lisa whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of pity and rage. 39 years of marriage, and he makes her his fall guy. My world tilted. The phone trembled in my hand. Fall guy prison. Before I could process the words, David's gaze locked directly onto the camera, his eyes widening in horror. Is that... The security camera's on. The light is red. Lisa's hand flew to her mouth as the feed cut to black. Someone David presumably had disabled it. I sat on my sister's guest bed, staring at the blank screen, the silence in the room roaring in my ears. My breath caught in my throat. I desperately tapped the screen, trying to reconnect, but it was useless. David had cut the feed. My mind raced, replaying their words. Accounts in my name. Prison. Dad set her up perfectly. What could it mean? My husband had been a respected conservative investment advisor. We'd lived comfortably but never extravagantly. Just as I was trying to call David, the call going straight to voicemail, my phone pinged with a new email notification. The sender was a jumble of random letters and numbers. The subject line read simply, "A warning." My fingers trembled as I opened it. The text was brief and chillingly direct. Stop watching. For your own safety, forget what you saw and what you heard. Jack's death was a lie, and he made sure you'll take the fall for everything. Don't go home. They're watching the house. A lie. I'd identified his body at the hospital myself, seen his ashen face with my own eyes. Or had I? As the plane lifted into the clouds hours later, taking me back toward a home that now felt like enemy territory, I ignored my sister's confused protests. A terrible thought bloomed in my mind. After 39 years of marriage, had I ever really known Jack Williams? The taxi pulled into my driveway just before 10 p.m. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, a perfect picture of suburban tranquility. A lie. Inside, the air was stale, but with a faint, unfamiliar trace of perfume. I moved through the downstairs, flicking on lights. In the kitchen, a coffee mug sat in the sink, a smear of deep red lipstick on the rim. Not my shade, not Lisa's. Jack's office door stood ajar. Pushing it open, I fumbled for the switch. The room was destroyed. File cabinets gaped open, their contents strewn across the floor. The large landscape painting behind his desk had been torn from the wall, revealing a wall safe I'd never known existed. Its heavy door hung open, empty. This wasn't vandalism, it was a methodical professional search. My phone buzzed. Another encrypted email. They didn't find what they were looking for. Check the loose floorboard under his desk chair. Dropping to my knees, I pushed the heavy leather chair aside and ran my fingers over the hardwood. One board shifted. I pried it up with my nails. Inside the hollow space lay not an envelope, but a small locked metal box. It was surprisingly heavy. Just as I was examining it, the front door opened and closed quietly. "Mom," David's voice. "Your flight wasn't supposed to land until tomorrow." Relief warred with a cold wave of suspicion. I slipped the box into my large purse, my heart hammering. "In here!" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. He appeared in the doorway, his face cycling through shock alarm, and then most tellingly fear. "Jesus," he breathed. "When did this happen?" "I was hoping you might tell me," I replied carefully, my gaze unwavering. "Since you and Lisa were just here looking for something in this very room." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by sheer panic. He saw the camera. "Mom, listen to me. We don't have time. You need to pack a bag and come with us right now. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what Jack did and why you were searching his office behind my back." Just as I spoke, headlights sliced through the office window, sweeping across the ransacked room as a dark SUV pulled into my driveway. David grabbed my arm, his face pale with terror. "There's no time to explain," he whispered urgently. "Dad's not dead, Mom. And the people in that car are the reason why. We have to run, now." David dragged me through the back garden and into the dense woods bordering my property, the oddly civilized chime of the doorbell echoing behind us. We ran like criminals, slipping through neighbors' darkened yards until we reached his car, parked 2 streets over, in a precaution that now seemed terrifyingly prescient. "Buckle up," he said, starting the engine, but keeping the headlights off until we were blocks away. My hands moved mechanically, my mind still reeling from his words. "Dad's not dead." "David," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "If you don't start explaining everything right now, I am going to open this door and throw myself from this moving car." He glanced at me, and whatever he saw in my expression convinced him I was not bluffing. "Okay," he sighed, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "The short version. About 3 months ago, Lisa and I got an anonymous package. Inside was a flash drive. It had financial records from Dad's firm showing he'd been running a massive money laundering operation for years." My protest died in my throat as he continued. "There were documents for multiple shell companies' offshore accounts, all with your signature on them." "I never signed anything," I insisted, my voice a hoarse whisper. "I know, Mom. They were flawless forgeries. I hired a private investigator, an ex-Secret Service guy named Grayson. He confirmed everything. Dad was siphoning money from clients for over a decade. The man I thought I knew was dissolving before my eyes. 2 weeks ago, David continued, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Grayson found something that suggested Dad might still be alive. Security footage from a hotel in Chicago dated 3 months after the funeral. It showed a man who looked exactly like Dad using the name Thomas Ellison. He took a deep, shaky breath. Grayson dug deeper. "Mom, Dad has another family in Chicago, a wife, Catherine. They've been married for 35 years. They have 2 grown kids." The world tilted and went gray. I pressed my hands to the dashboard, a wave of nausea washing over me. All those week-long conferences, the inflexible client meetings, the Christmases he missed for year-end reviews. It wasn't business. It was another life. We finally turned onto a gravel driveway leading to a small, isolated cabin. Lisa met us at the door, her face a mask of worry. "You told her," she said to David, pulling me into a hug. I was too numb to return. Inside, one wall was covered in what looked like something from a detective movie, photos, documents, and charts, all connected by a web of red string. At the center was a photo of Jack. From it, Lines branched out to a driver's license for Thomas Ellison, and pictures of a smiling, dark-haired woman, Catherine, standing beside him at a graduation, their arms linked. They looked happy. They looked real. Grayson thinks the scheme was collapsing, David said quietly, coming to stand beside me. So he faked a heart attack, had a funeral director paid off to use a John Doe from the morgue, and disappeared into his other life, leaving a perfect paper trail leading straight to you. I pulled the heavy metal box from my purse and set it on the table. I found this under his floorboard. Just then the door opened and a tall, weathered man with watchful eyes stepped inside. That he set his gaze locking on the box is likely the key to everything. "Mom, this is Malcolm Grayson," David said, gesturing to the man. "The investigator." Grayson's eyes, however, were on the metal box. With a set of small, precise tools from his bag, he worked the lock. It clicked open. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a single ornate key and a small, leather-bound ledger. "I've located Jack Grayson," said his voice a low gravel. "He's living as Thomas Ellison in a suburb north of Chicago called Lake Forest. The ledger likely contains financial details, but our real leverage is his other life. We're going to Chicago, today." I hadn't slept. The flight passed in a nauseating blur of rehearsed confrontations and the crushing weight of Jack's decades-long deception. How was it physically possible? The sheer logistics, I murmured to no one in particular as we drove our rental car from O'Hare. "Men with jobs requiring constant travel are best positioned to pull it off," Grayson replied from the passenger seat. 2 weeks with you, 2 weeks with her. Your husband had the perfect cover." The words landed like stones in my gut. Every inflexible business trip, every canceled vacation, every holiday he'd missed for a critical client meeting was a lie. He hadn't been alone in a hotel room. He'd been home with his other family. The contrast between my life and his other one was a physical blow. Our modest Connecticut colonial, where I'd clipped coupons and managed a careful budget, versus the sprawling Tudor mansion where Thomas Ellison lived. We parked down the street. Grayson raised a camera with a long telephoto lens. "That's Catherine leaving now," he said, his voice flat. A well-dressed woman about my age emerged, climbing into a white Lexus SUV, before driving away, oblivious that her husband's first wife was watching from less than 100 yards away. "Ready?" Grayson asked. "No," I admitted. "But let's do it anyway." I walked up the stone pathway, a surreal sense of disassociation washing over me. Before I could lose my nerve, I pressed the doorbell. Footsteps approached. The door opened. And there he was, Jack, alive. He was wearing casual slacks and a blue button-down shirt. I'd never seen a tumbler of scotch in his hand, despite the early hour. His expression cycled from annoyed interruption to pure, uncomprehending shock, and then to a flicker of something like terror as he registered my face. "Susan." He breathed, the color draining from his cheeks. "Hello, Jack," I said, my voice as steady and cold as ice. "Or do you prefer Thomas here?" His eyes darted past me, saw David and Grayson standing by the car, and the shock was instantly replaced by calculation. Even now, caught in the most profound lie imaginable, his mind was working the angles. "You'd better come in," he said, finally stepping back. "Before the neighbors see." The living room was a study in betrayal, where our Connecticut home was filled with comfortable, slightly worn furniture arranged for conversation. This space was a cold designer showcase. Quite the upgrade, I observed, taking a seat on a leather sofa without waiting for an invitation. Jack remained standing, his eyes darting between me, David, and Grayson, who had positioned himself near the door, a silent, immovable obstacle. "This isn't what it looks like," Jack began, the classic, pathetic defense of a guilty man. "Really?" I tilted my head. "Because it looks like you faked your own death, framed me for your crimes, and have been living a second life built on stolen money. Please explain where my interpretation is incorrect." "You set Mom up to take the fall." David stepped forward, his face tight with a rage I had never seen in him. "Your own wife." Jack's shoulders sagged. He moved to a bar cart and poured more scotch into his glass. The money laundering wasn't my idea. He started swirling the amber liquid. I was approached years ago by a client, Martin Keller. It got bigger. Last year, Keller brought in someone new, an oligarch named Anton Resnick. He was ruthless. The system was collapsing, and Resnick made it clear that failure wasn't an option. So you decided to disappear, I said, the pieces clicking into a monstrous picture. But why frame me? Something ugly flickered across his face. Not guilt, but annoyance, as if I were pointing out a minor flaw in an otherwise brilliant plan. It wasn't personal, Susan. It was pragmatic. I needed someone to take the fall. I calculated the risks. You're 62, no criminal record respected. You'd get a sympathetic judge, a minimal sentence, if any. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. He had sentenced me to prison as a business calculation. Where's the money, Dad? David demanded. Resnick's money. Jack's expression shuddered. He wouldn't answer. He was still trying to find an angle. I'm done talking, I said, rising from the sofa. I pulled out my phone. I am going to walk out that door, call a taxi, and then I am going to call Catherine Ellison and introduce myself. The threat hit its mark. He blanched. The money's in Switzerland, he said, his voice ragged. 30 million. In bearer bonds, secured in a private vault at Credit National in Geneva. It's only accessible with a physical key and a 12-digit access code. Where's the key? Grayson pressed. Jack's eyes darted to the staircase. In my office safe. Get it, Grayson ordered. Now. With visible reluctance, Jack headed for the stairs, Grayson following a few feet behind. As their footsteps receded, a loud crash echoed from the second floor, followed by Grayson's bellowed shout, "Stop!" David and I sprinted for the stairs. We reached the landing just in time to see Jack, a small metal box in his hand, crash through a set of French doors onto a balcony. He leaped with shocking agility to a nearby tree branch, scrambled down the trunk, and sprinted across the lawn toward a detached garage. The roar of an engine erupted as Jack's silver Mercedes burst out, tires squealing as it sped down the driveway. Get in, Grayson yelled, already running for our rental car. He has the key to the vault. The chase was short and futile. Jack, who knew the suburban streets like the back of his hand, both sets of them vanished into traffic. We lost him. Damn it, Grayson muttered, slamming his palm on the dashboard. As he looped back toward the highway, a memory clicked into place. Another one of Jack's casual lies, suddenly imbued with terrible significance. The hotel, I said suddenly. The Grayson in downtown Chicago. Whenever he was here on business, he always stayed there, claimed they had the best business center. Grayson navigated the city with grim efficiency. 10 minutes later, we pulled up to the hotel's opulent facade. We played our parts. Grayson approached the front desk, flashing a leather credential wallet just long enough to impress the young receptionist. Security matter. We need information on a guest, Thomas Ellison. When she hesitated, I stepped forward, improvising, twisting my wedding band. Please, I'm his wife, Catherine. He called me in distress. He said he left something critical in the hotel safe. The combination of authority and personal appeal worked. She admitted Mr. Ellison maintained a safe deposit box with the hotel, but he wasn't currently checked in. We had hit a dead end, but we knew he was coming here. We settled in the lobby to wait, Grayson and I covering the mezzanine level while David watched the main entrance. 40 minutes crawled by. Then my phone buzzed with a text from David. 2 men in suits just met a man matching Dad's description at the garage elevator. They're escorting him. It doesn't look friendly. Before we could even move, Grayson's phone rang, a burner phone he'd produced from his bag. He put it on speaker. It was Jack's voice, strained and breathless. Tell Susan I'm sorry. It's too late. Resnick's people have me. They'll assume you know where the codes are. They'll come for you. Run. The line went dead. The threat had just transferred from him to us. We were the targets now. The codes, I whispered, my librarian's mind frantically sifting through decades of memories. He wouldn't keep them anywhere obvious. An image surfaced, Jack at his desk, meticulously writing in a leather-bound journal. His legacy book, he'd called it. His journal, I said, certainty blooming. a red leather book in the right-hand drawer of his desk at home. He encoded everything important in it. Grayson was already dialing. "Lisa, we need you to find a red leather journal in Jack's desk immediately." The seconds stretched into an eternity as we waited exposed in the glittering lobby. "She found it," Grayson finally said, relief warring with urgency. "She's sending photos of the pages now." My phone buzzed. Images of Jack's neat handwriting filled the screen. I scrolled past family dates and anniversaries until one page stopped my breath. Legacy investments. A list of dates and numbers. But the numbers weren't portfolio values. Grouped in threes, they formed a perfect 12-digit sequence. We had it. We had the only thing that might keep us alive. Grayson made the call through channels I didn't dare ask about. The terms were brutally simple: Jack's life in exchange for the vault key and the 12-digit code. We found Jack's Mercedes abandoned at an O'Hare parking garage, and after a frantic search, Grayson found the heavy, ornate vault key hidden in a magnetic compartment beneath the passenger seat. The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district south of the city. David was to remain in the van as our only contingency, our dead man's switch. If we didn't check in all the evidence we had, Lisa's research, the journal pages, Grayson's own files, would be sent to a secure FBI contact outside of Chicago. The warehouse was a cavernous tomb, illuminated only by the harsh headlights of 3 black SUVs. Men in suits, their professional menace palpable, stood at strategic points. In the center, tied to a metal chair, was Jack. He'd been beaten. Dried blood caked the corner of his mouth, and he held himself with a rigid stillness that spoke of broken ribs. Our eyes met, and in his I saw not shame or fear, but the cold, frantic calculation of a rat in a trap. A tall man with silver hair and a bespoke suit stepped forward. "Anton Resnick." "Mrs. Williams," he greeted, his accent faintly Eastern European. "I appreciate your punctuality." "We've brought what you asked for," Grayson said, his voice flat. First I cut in my own voice, surprisingly steady. "I want your word that you will leave my family alone after this. My son, his wife, myself. We disappear from your radar." Of course, Resnick agreed smoothly. This was entirely of Jack's making. He gestured, and a guard cut Jack's restraints, hauling him roughly to his feet and shoving him toward us. As he stumbled past me, I caught the scent of dried blood, and his expensive cologne, a final absurd reminder of his facade. Grayson produced the vault key and the paper with the access code. "Bring them to me," Mrs. Williams Resnick commanded, changing the terms. It was a power play. I took the items from Grayson and crossed the concrete expanse. As I placed the key in Resnick's outstretched hand, his fingers closed around my wrist, holding me in place. "You should know," he said, his voice a low whisper. "For my ears alone, your husband offered to trade your life for his. Twice." He smiled, a cold, dead thing. Some men simply cannot be rehabilitated. He released me and I walked back to Jack's side, the last fragile thread of our shared history shattering into dust. "We're done here," Resnick announced. As his men flanked us, escorting us back toward the warehouse entrance, Jack leaned close. "Susan, whatever he told you, save it," I whispered fiercely. We piled into the van, and David floored its tires, squealing as we sped away. "That was too easy," I said. "They're following us," Grayson confirmed, checking the mirrors. "Of course they are," Jack rasped from the back. "Resnick never leaves witnesses." During the frantic chase through deserted industrial streets, as we swerved to a backup vehicle Grayson had staged, Jack saw his moment. While Grayson exchanged fire with our pursuers, Jack slipped out of the van. "Jack," I screamed. He paused in the shadows. "I'm sorry, Susan," he called back, his voice thin in the night air. "It's better this way." Then he turned and ran, abandoning us one last final time, leaving us to face the consequences of his life's work. 3 months later, I stood at the window of a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching the perpetual gray rain trace patterns down the glass. Here I was, Ellen Foster, a recent transplant from the East Coast, a simple cover identity arranged by Grayson, while the dominoes of Jack's criminal empire fell one by one. The evidence package he had sent, triggered one of the largest public corruption investigations in recent history. Anton Resnick, pragmatic to the end, had immediately turned state's evidence, and his testimony was dismantling the network from the inside. Senator Keller had resigned ahead of indictment. Judges and high-ranking police officials were arrested. The world Jack built was burning to the ground. David and Lisa, now 7 months pregnant, were also in a protected relocation, and his daily calls were a lifeline to a normality that felt a lifetime away. We talked of nurseries and childbirth classes clinging to the future. Any word about Jack? I always asked a question I both dreaded and needed answered. Nothing, hi, he'd say. Catherine Ellison filed a missing persons report for Thomas weeks ago. He just vanished. After abandoning us in that parking lot, he had evaporated more completely than his faked death. The buzzer from my apartment startled me. A small padded envelope with no return address had been delivered. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. I thought you should have this. He didn't deserve either of us. C.E. Catherine Ellison had found me. With trembling hands, I plugged the drive into my laptop. It was a single video file, security footage from a luxury hotel dated 3 weeks prior. I clicked play. The lobby was busy. Then Jack walked into frame. He was thinner, bearded, but it was him moving with that old confident stride. As he spoke to the receptionist, a second man, utterly unremarkable, approached him from behind. I saw Jack's expression shift in a matter of seconds from annoyance to recognition, and then to stark, primal fear. The man gestured to the elevators. Jack, stripped of all his bluster, complied. The video jumped to a hallway camera. They entered a room. The door closed. The timestamp jumped forward nearly 2 hours. The door opened. The unremarkable man emerged alone, straightened his jacket, and walked calmly to the emergency stairs. Jack never reappeared. The video ended. I stared at the blank screen, a profound, hollow calm settling over me. The man in that video wasn't my husband. Perhaps he never had been. Jack Williams died for me the day I learned of his betrayal. This was just the disposal of the body. I ejected the thumb drive, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into my cup of hot tea, watching the plastic warp and sink. The rain had begun to ease, and a pale afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds. My phone buzzed. It was a text from David, an ultrasound image of my granddaughter's tiny, perfect profile. "She already has your chin, Mom," he'd written. "We can't wait for you to meet her." A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Jack had taken our past, but he couldn't touch our future. I opened my laptop, navigated to the community college website, and registered for a class on watercolor painting. Ellen Foster had plans. And for the first time, I was looking forward, not backfilled, not with certainty, but with something far more valuable: possibility. The story of Jack Williams was over, its final violent chapter written in a silent hotel room. But my story, the real one, was just beginning. The deepest betrayals often come from those we trust the most, but they can also reveal a strength within us we never knew existed. If Susan's journey from a life of lies to one of truth and self-discovery resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own resilience. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for more stories of survival and justice. Let us know in the comments below. What was the moment you knew Susan was truly free? We love hearing your thoughts.